issue facing the United States of America?
The lack of a moral foundation. I've been on radio a span of 25 years. I know I don't look that old, but, and I have been shocked at the difference that I've seen. 25 years ago, if somebody did something a little naughty, or if they were sleeping around or doing this, that, or the other thing, they would be ashamed and embarrassed and hiding it. Today, people don't know to be ashamed and embarrassed because they don't seem to have much of a moral framework. I'm making a generalization here, but I think it really holds a lot of water, and that's sometimes is very frightening to me. You know, you'll be dealing with whether this is morally right, and they go, based on what? And I find that pretty shocking and sad and scary.
Governor Cuomo, America lacking a moral foundation?
Well, I think sometimes we behave that way. I think we have one immediately available to us that's about as good as any foundation that's ever been designed. We call ourselves Judeo-Christian in our legacy, but if you take Judeo-Christian and Islam, they stand basically, these religions, for two ideas that I think give us all the moral justification we need. The first is what the Hebrews called tzedakah, seeing ourselves as brothers and sisters. That's a Christian principle, and of course, a Muslim principle as well. And the second is, what do you do with this love relationship? Well, you finish the work of creation. What the Hebrews said is tikkun olam, you repair the universe. What the Christians say is you use all of your effort to make the whole place better. And what Islam teaches us is to be good in Islam. You have to be a good Jew and a good Christian. So these two principles, you're supposed to love one another, understand you're interconnected and interdependent, and make the place better. It's as simple as that. We're walking away from that in the country, you know, with our philosophy, which says more and more, no, you're on your own, buddy. The gun goes off, you go for the tape, and even if she's disabled, that's too bad. You know, that's not government's job. You can take care of that privately. So our government philosophy is moving away from the Judeo-Christian principles. We're spending a lot of time on punitive things, you know, sins, which is necessary. You commit a sin, that's wrong, and you pay a price. The part we're leaving out is the positive part. You're supposed to love one another, recognize a relationship, and get together to make everybody stronger.
Reverend Falwell, Governor Cuomo said the government pulling away from its obligations to the poor is an indication of a growing lack of moral foundation in America. Government should be doing more to help people.
I'll go back to Dr. Laura's comment of the lack of a moral base. And the first symptom of that is the breakdown of the family in this country. When you have a 50% divorce rate, when 70% of the black children, 30% of the white children are born out of wedlock in this country, when you have the drug problem, the violence, all this, by the year 2020, 2025, most of the prognostications would indicate, at the present trend, the virtual extinction of the family as we know it, the husband-wife relationship. The lack of a moral base, I think, goes back to the fact that this is not Christian, this is not Muslim, this is not Jewish. The husband-wife relationship is the sole basis for a family today has literally been trashed. And in New Jersey this week, the right for two gays to adopt a child is so absurd that it's hard to believe. As Dr. Laura said 25 years ago in this country, people got beat up for sleeping around. Today, I was on a program I won't mention, well, it was Larry King Live Friday night, talking with an ACLU lawyer and the two young men whose intentions I don't question, whose sincerity I don't question. I question the fact that with 5 million adoptive couples meeting all the state criteria, attempting to adopt in 1997, and only 50,000 adoptions, there are 100 families per baby available right now that are husband-wife approved relationships with stability. Why in the world would we want to trash the family? And as the court ruling, Judge Moses handed down, any two people, not just gays, lesbians, any two human beings who decide, let's adopt a child, you can now do it. It is so ridiculous that the courts, and as far as the government getting involved, I think the government needs to get lost. I think the churches, the synagogues, I think we need to start preaching a message that is, as Dr. Laura, I think she's the prophet to the nation right now.
You put a lot on the table. Reverend Jackson, let me get you in here. Congressman Jackson, the breakdown of the family, in Reverend Falwell's mind, is the most serious moral crisis facing America. Do you agree?
I think the most serious moral crisis and religious crisis facing our country and our world is arrogance and intolerance. When we look at the history of Christianity since Jesus rose from the dead, we have the spread of Christianity as a byproduct of the Crusades, where they used violence to spread Christianity. Europeans used colonialism to spread Christianity. Good Christian men in our nation, called African Americans, 3/5 of a human being, denied women the right to vote and to make choices for themselves. We took Native Americans' land. We have determined what is American, what is moral, and what is not moral. We have tried to impose our judgments upon people, and that arrogance and intolerance, I believe, to be the greatest dilemma facing religion and morality in our nation. In Congress today, we have men and women who vote against programs to feed hungry people, to feed and provide health care and housing for every American. And so when we look at the history of Christianity, we look at the history of religion, how tolerant we are and how arrogant we are in our assumptions about what is right and what is wrong continues to plague Christianity to this day.
When Reverend Falwell says that 7 out of 10 black babies born in America are born to a single parent, does that create, in your mind, a problem for the future of that baby?
It certainly creates a problem for the future of that baby. And so once we've acknowledged that there is a problem, we must now move towards solutions. And those solutions, I make the argument all the time on the floor of the Congress, cannot be made under the present budget considerations and in the present budget context of downsizing the federal government. It means more government involvement. It means more programs and more incentives that provide more family stability. The IMF is now suggesting that the U.S. economy is now overheating and therefore encouraging the Federal Reserve Board to raise interest rates. Well, if we raise interest rates, that's going to slow down growth. It's going to slow down business expansion. And if that happens, how do we make progress? The Protestant work ethic, which was the underlying factor in the welfare reform bill, how do we advance taking people off of welfare rolls and putting them to work under the Protestant work ethic if, in fact, we are not willing to advance a full employment economy, which we presently are not pursuing?
Tim, there's nobody at this table who questions the importance of charity towards the poor. Our church gives millions every year to that, and this country is the most giving nation in the world. I'm saying that the real problem, we could put all the money in the world into the hands of the people of this country, and we would just desecrate further the moral morass that plagues us. Money is not the cure. More taxes is not the cure. More welfare is not the answer. We've got to preach biblical morality, and as far as I'm concerned, Dr. Billy Graham and 600,000 pastors and priests and rabbis are doing that. But I'm glad for today, across a grassroots demand for morality. Most parents and grandparents are saying, I want some help for my children. I want them to grow up in a better America, not a richer one, a better one.
Dr. Laura, what do you say to the young 16, 17-year-old girl who wants dignity and thinks she finds dignity by having a baby, something she can call her own?
You know, it's not a matter of her finding dignity. I just find that there's just a lack of value system, and I think part of that is centered in the lack of stability of the family. And I was thinking, as you said that the problem is we're valuing all sorts of things as though they were equal, even superior to the family. So now we're having all kinds of benefits if people are just simply shacking up. That's the same benefit as a covenantal relationship between the people and the community and God. And we're saying any two people hanging out together, that's a family. A woman who decides at 35, you know, I don't really like guys that much, I can't find a good one, I'm just going to go to a sperm bank and make a kid. That we're supporting all of these things as though they were equivalent. It isn't government that's doing that. I think it's the decay of our basic moral religious framework, where we no longer see our basic animal needs for sex and togetherness elevated and made holy by covenantal relationships. We think anytime we act close to the animals, it's still okay. That's the main problem. And the young people, when they call me, they see their parents doing drugs, not being around, 3 different guys with the mother, the parents split, they go off, make new families. There is no stability because there is no pressure anymore to honor covenantal vows.
Who should provide that pressure?
I yell at the clergy all the time, and I'm non-denominational about my nagging. I think the clergy, all due respect, have become more like camp counselors than leaders. What they're doing is saying, I want the people to come back next week, can't challenge them too much, can't ask too much, can't tell them that religion demands something of them. God demands something of you, tikkun olam. And since they're not doing that, it's like the inmates are running the institution.
Do you think this problem is as severe for people who are making $100,000 or more? There's a
Yes.
new book on single parents by Melissa Ludke, who is a white woman, about 35, very well educated, had been married, and decided that she wanted a child. Her husband didn't, so she chose to have a child. And she's written a book about this syndrome all over the world, but particularly America. This is bright, responsible women who don't have a spouse, deciding to have a child on their own. Do you think they're menacing those children?
Yes,
And do you think these
there are no
problems, do you
dads.
think that the problems that you and the Reverend are calling, you know, the problems of the country are as severe for rich people and people who are doing well, like my family, as they are for people who don't have a good public school, don't have a job, are living in a hovel that they were introduced to when they were 2.5 years old, are surrounded by a society that's saying, go to charity if you need some help, because this government, the most powerful in history, with the richest top level ever in its life, that's about to bail out the whole East. You know, this country is not going to help you through our system because we want to cut the taxes on the rich
I'm
people.
against bailing out the East, too.
Meanwhile, you should learn to love one another. You should be Christian or Jewish or perfect or Muslims. You know, behave nicely, but don't ask us, this the wealthiest nation in the world, to help you in any material way. That you have to go to charity for. I don't think that works.
But it's been indicated, I'm sorry, let me just answer to that, please, I'll turn it right to you. You know, there's enough research to show that the problem of a non-two-parent family answers a lot to the economics. When women choose to have children without men around, that is contributing to their
divorced
problem.
women, doctor, who are divorced. And because
You know, I
they're
talk to these people every day. They
well, what
marry
should they do,
hardly
give up
knowing
their
each other.
children?
No, they marry when they hardly know each other.
But should they
don't.
stay married because you feel that if she now is left as a single parent, this child is going to be corrupted? Would you like to know some of the children who were raised by single parents who went on to be great leaders in this society? I mean, this notion that you need to have a man and a woman no matter what, even if he's a brute.
I
even
never
if
said
she's
that.
But
But I never said
you've
that.
been
Here we are
simplistically
again.
saying that if it's single parenthood, that's the problem, and it's not.
Here we are again imposing our views on families in America. How people handle and raise their families and the determinations that they make in their individual families is part of the intolerance and part of the arrogance of those who assume what our family values and how they should be imposed upon other people. When I was elected to Congress, I put my hand on the Bible and I swore to uphold the Constitution. I did not put my hand on the Constitution, swear to uphold the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, be anyone's humanistic leader. They elected me to be their representative, not to be their pastor or to be their preacher. And in our society, that creates the irony of believers having to defend the rights of unbelievers and unbelievers having to defend the rights of believers. But that's what makes America so great. So here we are now trying to impose our values. I happen to think, as a matter of value, that which we can impose upon our families is a job. I think that's central to family values. An adequate wage and a living wage that families can send their children to college. I think health care is central to family values. I think more families would stay together if they had family health care plans. But that presupposes a certain level of growth in our society, which contributes to family values. In my district, Dr. Laura, compared to other districts in the city of Chicago, there's 19 and 20% growth in other districts. In my district, negative 2% growth. And in that environment, children are shooting each other. Parents and fathers are leaving their wives. Men are making babies that they're not willing to raise. It is functioning in an economic environment on that side of Chicago, but not on other sides of Chicago. And we should not separate the reality that we can fix and work towards from their present reality.
But there is one statistic that I think could be overriding to this debate, and that is if you are 18 years old, unmarried, without a high school education, without a job, and you have a baby, the chances are 80% the baby will grow up in poverty.
Well, those are all poor
And
people.
that's
If
how
people.
you're situated in the economy.
If you're 18, married, with a job, and you have a baby, the chances are 8%.
That's right.
Well,
That's
that's
correct.
exactly, you're talking about poor people. Poor people who are born in an environment where they're desperate, some of them having children because they don't see any alternative. As you pointed out, we had a program in New York called New Avenues to Dignity instead of the mean streets. And those are young people who, through no fault of their own, were introduced to a world that was prostituted, debased, degenerate, no real opportunity, no good public school, no jobs for them, and they made wrong choices. They decided to have children before they were ready to have children. Absolutely, that's a problem. And they should be instructed, and we should be firm, and we should teach them responsibility. But we should help them the way you would help your own child. If she came home and said that she was a drug addict, what would you do? Deliver a homily on responsibility? You'd do that, but then you'd get her a therapist, you'd try to help her. We're not doing that with our own
Marion,
children.
I agree with that totally, what you just said. But the policy that the congressman and you are advocating has been in practice for about 25 years and has pretty well put the country going to hell in a handbasket.
No, I don't know
and I
what
want
you
to
mean,
tell you
Reverend.
that
No,
the only
excuse me,
way...
what policy, Reverend?
The policy that we can buy our way out of moral degradation.
I didn't say you can buy
I think
your way.
we need to be teaching responsibility
Reverend,
to husbands. Let me finish first.
No, because
you interrupted me.
No, we're not going to let you start with a false premise.
Yeah.
If you're talking about 25 years, I want to know what policy failed. You mean...
From the Great Society to the present day, we have had the idea in this country that just dump more money on every problem and
that's
we'll solve
not
it.
my idea.
I'm saying that we need to teach
excuse me, who
boys
had
and
that
girls.
idea?
Just let me finish. We need to teach boys and girls. They have a responsibility. If you bring a child into this world, both of you should raise that child.
Absolutely.
And that we should, I minister to single parents, as you do, Dr. Laura, millions of them through TV, radio, local churches. But I'm saying that we have a spiritual problem in America. It is not financial. It is not political. It is deeply spiritual. And that talking about the Judeo-Christian ethic is one thing, but bringing people back to it means we've got to say what you're doing is wrong. For example, we're telling the gay and lesbian public what you're doing is okay, but do it with constraints. What they're doing is not okay. It's wrong. It's an aberration of moral behavior. And we as Christians and you as a Jew and Muslim, we ought to all be working and all agree on what I've just said in their theological basis. We ought to work hard lovingly to reach out and change.
Absolutely.
We lead gays and lesbians to Christ, who are no longer gays and lesbians after they receive the crucified Christ.
This is, again, more intolerance and bordering on arrogance.
The gospel is not intolerance,
The reality is, Reverend, many gays and lesbians and many Americans don't live under your moral code. They don't live under our Christian gospel.
Your daddy has preached in my pulpit, and I preached in his.
They do not live under our code. They
And
do
in
not
those
live,
days, we
some of
both
them live
preached that
under
code.
Islam, some of them are atheists, some of them are agnostic. We live under a constitution. And under that constitution, they are entitled to equal protection under the laws.
Absolutely.
And that same constitution affords them the opportunity to have a different position than yours on this subject.
Governor Cuomo.
The Reverend is right when he says we should be preaching to them and we should be holding them responsible. Absolutely. I am right when I say that the government collectively should be helping them materially. And the Reverend's, observation, which frankly is intellectually irritating. Well, you had these programs for 20. You've had religion for 200 years. Would the Reverend accept?
No.
Just a minute. Would the Reverend accept? Oh, really? You mean? And it's failed.
4,000 years.
Well, then, Reverend, hold it. Then I would say to you, you've had
that's her value, and that's his
How do you feel about the argument? You've had religion for 2,000 years, and it failed, Reverend.
I'm telling you,
because
one
these
generation
people-
ago, it didn't fail. In this
Oh, no,
country.
but it's
in
failed.
the last
Since
generation.
you were a Reverend, it failed.
When
Would
I
you
began
accept that
preaching
criticism?
45 years ago,
In the last-
we did not have
why
in
isn't
this
it
country.
failed?
But I'm
You
telling
believe-
you,
Reverend
you
Falwell,
believe ever since.
Reverend Falwell,
let
in the
me-
last...
That's what you
in the
did
last-
about
in the
government. You
last
said it
generation-
existed, it didn't solve the problem,
last-
therefore it failed. You'd have to say the
your
same
father,
thing.
and
Reverend
I,
Falwell, in the last
your father and I
generation-
were both pro-life when we started the ministry. Your dad, unfortunately, capitulated to the Democratic platform. He's pro-choice now. But your father and I have been friends for many years. He preached the same gospel, the death, burial, resurrection of Christ. He preached that the only hope is a new birth, a spiritual regeneration. He preached against abortion. He preached all the things that I preach now. Now, I haven't changed. And I'm hoping that you, as a young congressman,
why isn't it
will go
working?
back to the... it is working where people
then
believe
there
it.
isn't a problem.
It is working. Of
But then
course
there
there's a
isn't a
problem. There
problem.
would not be a need for the
But
Lord
why?
if there were no
But
problems.
why, if all you need is the preaching?
I can tell you that the philosophy you two guys advocate
No,
here
you
is a
didn't
dead
answer my
old
question.
liberal
No, you
philosophy
don't even know what
that
that
has
philosophy
ruined
is.
and
I
wrecked
haven't
us.
told you what it is.
Let me ask the question then. Should the United States government say that the central mission of our society is to get an education, learn a skill, get a job, get married, and then have a baby in that order? Reverend Jackson.
The United States government can provide an environment for families to survive, But I think that, that having a baby in a particular order violates the spirit of what Mr. Madison and Mr. Jefferson were creating when they created the Constitution. And while I am a Christian minister, I had never, before I became a member of Congress, had to defend the rights of people who believe or don't believe. And now in this position, they have the right to have a baby in whatever order they choose to have a baby in. But what we can do as a government is provide health care for those families. We can provide a job for those families. We can create the kind of economic security for every American that allows us to advance family values far beyond any kind of family values that we're presently talking about. Dr. Laura, let me make just one more point, because 25 years ago, I was 6 years old. And Reverend Falwell has suggested that the last generation...
And I was much older.
25 years ago, the country was growing at about 5%. Today, the country is growing at about 2.3, 2.4%. In that economic environment, more Americans felt secure, they felt comfortable in their homes and in their families, and we advanced social programs. We advanced a new social policy called affirmative action and others that broadened America and made it possible for more Americans to participate in the American dream. In this present economic environment of growth at only 2% per year, it is impossible to advance even the kind of values that Reverend Falwell is talking about.
Dr. Laura?
I'm real confused here because we seem to be talking about two different things. Governor Cuomo said that when you commented a minute ago, you know, I'm getting I have three thoughts, and I'm sorry, I'm getting them all confused. Religion is not to fix the problem after the fact. The point of religious training is to aspire to be, well, we're sort of in between animal and the potential of human beings moving to the holy, to be in the image of God. We are naturally not moral and holy creatures. We are not naturally that. That is something we have to work toward and aspire to. It is something that you teach and inspire with. It's not something that can fix it after the fact. Governor is completely correct. When somebody's sitting there having given birth to 4 kids with 3 different guys and she's not married, coming in at that point is probably not going to be helpful, except maybe to avoid the next one. But what has happened in our society is that we say, yeah, you really should do it in this order. But if you don't, we're going to take care of you and provide everything. Well, when I talk to parents who are that way with their kids, this is the way we'd like you to be. But if you don't worry, you can live here, we'll buy you a car, we'll take care of you. It doesn't help.
That's not the role. That's not the role.
That's
of
what I
religion
hear.
in
It doesn't
society.
help
No,
inspire.
good religion deals with the ought. Good
Yes.
politics deals with the is. And there will always be a healthy tension between that which ought to be and that which is.
I agree.
And politics deals with that kind of reality, and religion deals with the ought.
If that's what the social programs were doing, saying, look, you will be immunized against any cost for irresponsibility, then they would be terribly wrong. They don't do that. If in fact the welfare program, well, let me give you some specifics,
You're
okay?
gonna fool me.
Well, maybe that's not too hard.
Oh, come on.
You know,
That's no nice.
well, let's say, if the social policy, like welfare, invites a woman to have a baby just so she can get herself an apartment, that's probably a bad welfare provision. And that's why in states like New York, you don't have that. And that's why overall the welfare reform changed it, because they thought this was an incentive, an invitation that was too tempting to a young girl who didn't like where she was because it was a very unpleasant place and might consider having a baby just to get out. That's bad policy. We all agree on that. And if you discovered that the bankruptcy laws were an incentive to free enterprise to be corrupt in the way it managed its own profit making, you'd have to give up the bankruptcy law because it wouldn't be working well. And so what you need is a social policy that helps that young woman without making her life worse by tempting her to make another mistake. That's all. Just let's be reasonable in both. You need preaching, of course. Religion is a wonderful, marvelous, positive force. But you should also have a government that puts that preaching into action. Without running up big taxes, keeping the deficit down, you can still find, and you know who says this? The Republicans. Because on this program a year ago, Dan Coates, one of the best of all the Republicans, and Reverend Watts, I think, talked about $50 billion more that are needed for children through government. Only they chose a different way to do it. They wanted tax credits. Why? That's better for the wealthy people, frankly. But the main point that they were making was we need at least $50 billion more through our government. to help poor people. They agree with Reverend Falwell. They agree with you that you have to preach, you have to be responsible, but they also took that next step, which is all important.
I believe that you believe everything you're saying.
Thank you,
because you are a legislator, you are a lawmaker, you're in government. I believe the congressman, he and I are friends.
We are.
And I believe we are. Believes
Brace
all
yourself.
that. But let me tell you, I, as a pastor, and thousands more, I'm down in the trenches, working where the people are. I go in the homes, I pray with them, I bring groceries to their door. I'm talking about millions of them through our various people and agencies. I own and operate, our ministry does, a home for unwed mothers. I own and operate a home for drug addicts and alcoholics. We own and operate a ministry for the aged, and so forth and so on. We are down there every day. I have 40 associate pastors. I've been doing this 45 years, 42 years in the same pulpit. And I'm telling you, the reality of what you're saying is not coming through. And I go into homes where they say, we got to have another baby. The lady says, because I got to have more money. And regardless what your intent is, but that is what's interpreted out there.
You have done a fantastic job. I don't think anyone can deny that. But all of the churches in America are not responsible for the general welfare of every American. That is a constitutional responsibility that belongs to their government.
No, I think
and
we
people
have a
right in this government
we have
to
a higher
redress its grievances.
responsibility to God to be responsible for our brother's needs and so forth.
We don't live in a theocracy.
And
we live in a democracy.
I believe in welfare that is properly based. I believe in helping.
Good.
I believe in Social Security. I believe in all those programs. What I'm saying is the philosophy that we just got to have $80 billion more to throw at this thing and we'll solve it.
I don't believe in corporate welfare. We're not talking about corporate welfare here. We're talking about
saying that, because that really is bombfoggery. We're not talking about throwing money. Look, we're not talking about throwing money at a problem. Would you say that about defense, where we jumped the budget $20 billion beyond what the Pentagon asked for? Would you say, oh, you're just throwing money at defense? Would you say that about corporate subsidies?
I'm against $10,000 screwdrivers also.
Okay, all right. So we all agree you don't want to spend too much money. You don't want to waste money. Whether it's a good social program like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, public schools, yes, we don't want to waste money. Let me ask you about private charity. We're the most generous nation in the world. You're absolutely right, Reverend, and we should all be proud of that. And private charity, yours, the Catholic charities, UJA, Protestant Church, the Salvation Army, what percentage of the work they do you think is government money? And do you think they should stop using the government money?
None of mine is.
All right, but do you think these others should stop using the government money?
Well, I can't speak for other people, but I'm not willing to have government change on what I do, so I've never taken a dime from it.
So then you think UJA and Catholic Charities that does an enormous amount of good, feeding hungry people in Ohio, the Ohio Hunger Task Force, most of its money comes from the government.
Sir,
Don't you think that is a proper
Where does the government get that money?
Don't you think it's a proper use of government?
They feed the hungry people at the
No, we're
same
about to-
time they give the scriptures to them, so that we're taking care of your immediate needs, and here is the thinking you have to have so that we can move out of that. The government just comes in and takes care of that. That's why
Laura,
I think the religious
And that's why the
Do you
government's-
agree that they should use the government
as long as
resources?
there are no constraints on the fact that they're getting moral
fine.
instruction.
But they should use the government resources.
Without any
I'm not the
restraints
expert to
or
say that.
I see. Okay,
That's why
all
the
right.
government's
It's not my
policy.
field.
That's why the government's policy of first resort must be full employment. It must provide a job for every American. And guess what, Reverend Falwell? There'll be less hungry people. And that requires incentive, it requires a growing economy, it requires a relationship between the government sector, public sector, and the private sector to create a kind of
It
economy that
requires
is
you
more
finishing
participatory.
high school so that you'll be actually able to do the job.
Unfortunately, Dr. Laura, in today's economy, you have to finish college. And that's also a problem.
Okay, all right. But the point is that each individual has to bring something to the table, or no matter what's on the table, they won't be able to avail themselves.
We all agree, Doctor, but to finish high school, you need a good high school. 50 million children are in public schools. We, in the last time we made a budget, said we had hundreds of billions of dollars over a decade for tax cuts, but when Carol Mosley Braun raised her hand and said, you need $110 billion to repair the public schools, will you give us 5? They said, no. We can't afford that 5.
I can speak to this. All the money that is necessary to go into the high school should be there, but there are a lot of wasted programs.
Absolutely.
They cut things like
We're with you.
music, and then they put things in like AIDS awareness in 3rd grade.
Laura,
I mean,
if we get
So far, the
Reverend
conversation
Falwell,
has
we're
been
unanimous.
been between the government and the church and the private sector, where 5 out of every 6 jobs presently are located. have not even been part of this discussion, and they should pay their fair share of taxes, and they must provide the kind of jobs for Reverend Falwell's poor people so that they can work their way out of their condition.
Congressman Jackson, there has also been some discussion about Reverend Falwell and Dr. Laura believe some things are right and some things are wrong. Reverend Falwell said gays should not be able to adopt children. Is that right or is that wrong? And what should government do about it?
Government can afford gays and lesbians equal protection under the law. Before Reverend
the answer is yes.
The answer, Reverend Falwell, is that we live under a constitution and not under your moral code. And that's what you have to appreciate and understand. And Mr. Madison and Mr. Jefferson, homosexuality was a reality in their time as well.
They would have voted no on that. You can bet your life on it.
No, had they voted today, had they voted today, they would have.
Ethic that we talked about a moment ago. As long as this country legally allows the abortion, the murder of 1.2 million unborn babies every year in this country, as long as this country legalizes and actually glorifies the gay and lesbian lifestyle as being acceptable alternative, although many gays and lesbians get their lives changed, come to Christ through the gospel and are born again and never live that life again, as long as we advocate that partial birth abortion, killing a fully developed baby to get a technical loophole away from murder,
Reverend Falwell, is legal.
As long as we do that, this country will never return to
it is legal. But since you and I never have to have an abortion, we should let women make that choice. We should trust women enough to make that decision.
You're a female.
But you don't speak for all women.
But Dr. Laura,
but she does not speak for all women.
Dr. Laura,
and that's why the Constitution provides an environment.
I speak for all babies.
Dr. Laura, you heard Reverend Falwell say his prescription is to ban all abortions.
I didn't say ban all abortions. I think where the physical life of the mother is at stake, I think where rape and incest are, I think there should be a moral. I'll get back and explain that. Morally, I'm talking about the reality of law is where the physical life of the mother is threatened. I think there's a self-defense thing. Morally, I do not believe that abortions on the basis of rape and incest should be allowed.
Here we are back to intolerance.
But legally, I don't think that will ever happen in this country. So, but I'm saying that killing unborn babies, 99% of which are for convenience, is such an invocation of God's wrath upon this country that God is not going to bless America until we stop doing it.
Not everyone in America
also said you would
believes in God.
outlaw homosexuality. How would you do that?
Oh, I didn't say I would outlaw homosexuality. I would say I would not reward it. I think that adultery is also equally sinful. Men unfaithful to their wives, wives to their husbands.
How are we rewarding
I think that
it?
all sex outside of a covenant relationship between a man and a woman, marriage, is wrong. I think the Bible teaches that, but I think common sense, thousands of years of civilized society tell us that the husband-wife relationship is the stable unit in a civilized society, and children everywhere become better children when they're offered that.
Poverty in the family, drugs, sex, rock and roll, and babies out of wedlock with kids, it's so tightly associated with a lack of a dad in the home. I don't see why it's still an argument. Kids need a mom and a dad. We have two sexes, we have two genders, we're very different. I'm more kissy slurpy, you know, as a mother, and you talk to all mothers, and we're the kissy slurpy ones, and you're the ones who tell them to go out and take risks, and, you know, a boo-boo won't hurt them. All of this polarity into a child helps them develop fully psychologically. All the psychological research seems to indicate that, the sociological research seems to indicate that. So when we talk about the rights of adults and their feelings, we ignore the absolute needs of children.
What the research actually indicates, Tim, what the research actually indicates is that children need love. And that love can be given by anybody and from anybody.
That is wrong.
That is not even close to wrong. That's what the research indicates.
Wrong, it does not.
I think Dr. Laura is correct. If what you're saying is this, ideally, a solid father and a solid mother are a good arrangement. I agree with that, and I was blessed that way.
How is government supporting that?
Now,
if we're agreeing that that... But how are you supporting that?
May I finish?
Neither one of you can.
But how are you supporting
may I
that?
finish
You
that?
say it and then you dismiss it.
May I finish? You see, a husband and a wife, a solid union, that's good. A husband and a wife in a neighborhood with a good school, that's better. A husband and a wife where the husband has a good job, that's better still. And with a house, that's better still. And so these are ideals, and we should strive for them. That's absolutely...
But how does the government
Merry
support
Christmas and
that?
Happy Hanukkah to all of us.
The easiest way is by an economy that allows people the opportunity to work and rise up.
Values are not
right now you have an
values are not
economy
dependent upon the economy.
To be continued, Father Time.
Father Time.
Keep preaching, Dr. Laura.
Reverend Falwell, Marion Cuomo, Jesse Dexter, Merry Christmas, Dr. Laura, Happy Holidays, Happy Hanukkah. And we'll be right back with our Meet the Press Minute. Robert Frost from 39 years ago, talking about the meaning of life and materialism.
Turtle, come on, Turtle, I got fresh beer, I gotta get through. Come on, this way, that's it, come. What?
Everybody likes to have a good time. But hey, before you go out to party, always choose a designated driver. It's a sign of intelligent life.
Where to, guys?
Our Meet the Press Minute with Robert Frost, right after this very brief station break.
This week on Today, take your first trip to the edge of outer space in a U-2 spy plane. How America keeps a 24-hour watch on the world. This week on Today.
Dateline Sunday. Out of control football fans. Is there a way to stop them? How about a court, judge, and jail inside the stadium? It's happening here, but is it working? Dateline tonight.
Out in the turquoise sea, somewhere between your imagination and what's real, there is an island, Barbados, just beyond your imagination. For information, call us or your travel agent.
How has Hank helped you lately?
How many of them take cabs?
She found out that over $1 million of your tax dollars are spent chauffeuring addicts to methadone clinics.
You could buy her a BMW.
Hank Philippi Ryan investigates only on the news station, 7 News.
Christmas time. 39 years ago, Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Robert Frost shares his thoughts on America's character and the meaning of life.
Mr. Frost is now almost 85 years old, but he still is young in hopes and in dreams, free from despair and pessimism. He is a man of deep loyalties to his land and his people. While he is known as a New England poet, he is the poet of all America. Indeed, it can be said that he is the poet of all mankind.
What has happened to the American character, Mr. Frost, in these last 30 years? Are we a merrier people at Christmas time?
That's interesting to say. I think, no, I think, you know, that'd be a hard thing for me to judge. We're always rather merry people.
What do you, as a poet, think is the meaning and purpose of life?
Of life?
Yes, sir.
I imagine the meaning of it is to dive further into the further and further into the material for you know not what reason. The ethereal, the spiritual, diving into the material. Always at the fear that, you know, always in the fear of losing the meaning some way, but deeper and deeper into the material. I call it materiality is our destiny, materiality. And our danger is materialism. And materialism is when the meaning gets lost in the material.
2 years later, Congress awarded Robert Frost a gold medal in recognition of his poetry, saying it enriched the culture of the United States and the philosophy of the world. He died in 1963 at the age of 88. And we'll be right back.
Meet the Press is sponsored by GE. Visit us online at www.ge.com. GE, we bring good things to life.
It flies away from false boundaries.
Through the rare air and blue altered sky.
Silent and proud.
It rides on the glory of the world-waking day.
The GE people who service jet engines share a common passion for their work.
Genius of steel. Web of power.
And none express this more poetically than the GE technicians in Nantgarw, Wales.
It was all shining and bright.
Spinning in time.
And I heard in the turning
the whisper of truth. Working in wonder.
Humbled in detail.
I stand spellbound.
In the beauty of perfection.
In GE service sites all over the world, the result of all this pride and passion is simply jet engines that run like pure poetry.
And so in the legend of Blue Fields, the sleep of the innocent lay undisturbed and just.
Trust. We are not born with an instinct to trust. Trust must be earned. Trust must be proven. We earn it with integrity. We prove it with sound advice. Trust is the ultimate measure of our success. And at Dean Witter, we measure success one investor at a time.
My dad bought this farm in 1927. He knew these fields like the back of his hand. This land's been good to us. It's fed my family and thousands of others. Trouble is, the experts say that by the year 2050, world population will nearly double. And because people will demand more food of higher quality, farm output will need to triple. Since our planet's not getting any bigger, these fields will have to work harder than ever. That's why new farming technologies are so urgently needed. With help from military satellites, I can create precise maps of my fields that help me pinpoint where crop growth isn't what it should be. Then, by treating those spots, I can get higher crop yields from the same amount of land. With this new satellite technology, I know precisely where to apply chemicals and fertilizers, and that's good for the environment.
Proclaiming the good news about precision farming methods is important to the Archer Daniels Midland Company because feeding the world is...
What should be done about those fanatical sports fans who turn fun into violence? One city has found an instant and sobering form of justice. It could be coming to a stadium near you at 7, 6 Central on Dateline.
Thank you, Jane Pauley. Check out our 50th anniversary Meet the Press website at msnbc.com. Start today, tomorrow, and today with Katie and Matt, then the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. That's all for today. We'll be back next week. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. Luke, thanks for the tie, buddy. Notice that. Luke, buddy, get it? Merry Christmas, everybody.